The Hardships of Human Life in Antiquity, an Analytical Perspective. The Chronicle of Humanity is, at its core, a story of adaptation, endurance, and resilience in the face of relentless challenges. From prehistoric times to the dawn of written civilization, humans confronted countless life-threatening difficulties, environmental constraints, and social upheavals. Examining these hardships is not merely an exploration of a distant past. It is a vital investigation into the fundamental forces that shaped human society, culture, and psychology. Understanding the lived experiences of ancient peoples, their struggles with hunger, disease, climate, war, and social transformation provides profound insight into the evolution of human survival and cooperation. This thesis aims to present a comprehensive analysis of the challenges faced by humans in antiquity through a multidisciplinary lens that includes archaeology, anthropology, environmental history, and the social sciences. The research draws upon the contextual realities of prehistory and early history, integrating recent academic interpretations and empirical findings. Through an examination of subsistence strategies, environmental hazards, health crises, sociopolitical conflicts, and cultural adaptation, this study illuminates the intricate network of factors that defined ancient human existence. The central question it addresses is this: what were the principal hardships faced by ancient peoples, and how did these shape the course of human development? By systematically analyzing the evidence and theories presented in reference literature, this thesis seeks to shed light on the lived realities of our ancestors. It underscores the importance of historical challenges and contemporary understandings of human resilience and social evolution. The structure of the study follows a logical progression, from environmental and biological difficulties to socio-political and cultural dimensions, and concludes with a synthesis that situates ancient hardships within the broader trajectory of human history. Environmental and ecological challenges. The uncertainty of climate and geography. Environmental conditions constituted the most immediate and persistent challenges for early humans. The fluctuating climates of the Pleistocene and Holocene eras determined resource availability, migration patterns, and the sustainability of early settlements. Paleoclimatic data reveal that ancient societies were often subjected to dramatic shifts in temperature, rainfall, and ecological balance. Such fluctuations frequently triggered periods of resource scarcity, forcing groups either to adapt or to migrate. Geographical constraints compounded these challenges. Early humans depended heavily on local ecosystems for food, water, and shelter. In arid or glacial regions, even basic survival could become precarious. The dispersal of Homo sapiens into Eurasia and the Americas exposed populations to unfamiliar dangers such as new predators, diseases, and ecological niches. The ability to interpret and respond to environmental signals became a key determinant of group survival. Resource scarcity and seasonal variability. Resource scarcity, stemming from environmental unpredictability and limited early technology, was a constant feature of ancient life. Although hunter-gatherer societies were often more resilient to food shortages than later agrarian ones, they still faced famine during periods of overhunting, drought, or climatic anomalies. Seasonal variability demanded the development of complex foraging strategies, storage technologies, and social networks for sharing surplus resources. The transition to agriculture, often viewed as a solution to food insecurity, paradoxically introduced new vulnerabilities. Sedentary farming communities became increasingly dependent on a narrow range of crops, rendering them susceptible to pests, disease, and adverse weather. Archaeobotanical evidence points to recurring famines and the emergence of social hierarchies around the distribution of scarce resources in early agrarian societies. Natural disasters and catastrophic events. Ancient societies were also exposed to destructive natural events such as floods, droughts, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions. Archaeological records are filled with evidence of settlements abandoned due to environmental catastrophes. These events not only caused immediate loss of life and property, but also triggered long-term social transformations, migration, political collapse, and community reorganization. Coping mechanisms ranged from the development of religious or ritual responses to technological innovations in construction and land management. Health, disease, and demographic challenges, paleopathology, and the burden of disease. One of the most formidable difficulties of antiquity was the prevalence of illness and poor health. Skeletal remains and mummified bodies provide strong evidence that early populations suffered from high rates of infectious and chronic diseases. Parasitic infections, dental decay, malnutrition, and trauma were common, severely limiting both life expectancy and quality of life. With the advent of agriculture and increasing population density, the epidemiological landscape changed dramatically. Sedentary life facilitated the spread of communicable diseases, while close proximity between humans and domesticated animals led to the emergence of new zoonoses. Epidemics periodically decimated communities, as evidenced by mass graves and sudden demographic shifts in the archaeological record. Malnutrition and dietary stress, nutritional deficiency, represents a recurring theme in the study of ancient hardships. Stable isotope analyses of skeletal remains reveal that many prehistoric populations suffered from chronic malnutrition, particularly deficiencies in protein and micronutrients. Such conditions were exacerbated by dependence on limited food sources and by environmental disruptions to subsistence systems. Malnutrition had profound effects on mortality, morbidity, and reproductive success. Stunted growth, weakened immunity, and increased susceptibility to infection were widespread consequences. Archaeological evidence also indicates that social stratification often created disparities in food access, further deepening health inequalities within early communities. Trauma, injury, and early medical practices, physical trauma, arising from accidents, interpersonal violence, and warfare was another defining feature of ancient life. Skeletal analyses reveal high rates of fractures, blunt force injuries, and weapon-related wounds across many societies. The absence of effective medical intervention meant that even minor injuries could become fatal due to infection or complications. Despite these hardships, evidence of primitive medical practices exists. Trepanation, herbal medicine, and rudimentary surgical procedures demonstrate early attempts to relieve suffering and prolong life. However, their effectiveness was limited by the lack of germ theory, anesthesia, and advanced surgical techniques. Social and political challenges, conflict, violence, and warfare. The emergence of complex societies brought new forms of challenge associated with conflict and violence. Archaeological and written sources document frequent outbreaks of intergroup warfare, raids, and social strife. Competition for resources, territorial disputes, and struggles for political power often resulted in cycles of violence and revenge. The impacts of warfare on ancient societies were profound. Beyond immediate loss of life, conflicts led to displacement, destruction of infrastructure, and disruption of economic activity. Although difficult to reconstruct archaeologically, the psychological trauma of violence must have been widespread. Social stratification and inequality. As societies grew and became more complex, social stratification emerged as a defining characteristic of ancient life. The establishment of hereditary elites, specialized labor, and unequal access to resources introduced new hardships for subgroups. Archaeological evidence, grave goods, housing inequality, and dietary differences confirms the prevalence of inequality in many early societies. For the majority, life was shaped by hard labor, limited autonomy, and precarious livelihoods. The rise of slavery, serfdom, and tribute systems institutionalized exploitation and deprivation. These social structures often persisted for centuries, shaping the destinies of entire civilizations. Law, order, and social control efforts to maintain social order introduced further complexities. Early legal codes, such as the Laws of Hammurabi, reflected the central role of coercion in preserving authority, prescribing severe punishments for various offenses. Corporal punishment, imprisonment, and public execution functioned as mechanisms of social control, often targeting marginalized groups. Taxation, conscription, and forced labor also imposed heavy burdens on ancient populations. Surviving documents and administrative records detail the enforcement of taxes, corvée labor, and military service, all exacting a significant toll on the lower strata of society. Psychological and cultural challenges: fear, uncertainty, and the human spirit. The omnipresence of danger and uncertainty in antiquity profoundly shaped early human psychology. The unpredictability of food supplies, the threat of violence, and environmental volatility likely produced chronic stress and anxiety. Though direct evidence of ancient mental states is scarce, the ubiquity of ritual, myth, and religion suggests attempts to impose meaning and control on a chaotic world. Rituals and belief systems provided frameworks for understanding misfortune and coping with fear. Sacrificial ceremonies, divination, and ancestor worship are documented across cultures as responses to existential insecurity. These cultural adaptations offered comfort, but also demanded substantial material and social investment, sometimes deepening the burdens they sought to alleviate. Cultural transformation and identity. Crisis periods of rapid, environmental or social change inevitably triggered crises of cultural identity. Whether through migration, conquest, or ecological disaster, the collapse of traditional lifeways forced communities to reassess their beliefs, practices, and social bonds. Archaeological evidence of sudden shifts in pottery styles, burial customs, or settlement patterns reveals turbulent processes of adaptation. For individuals and groups alike, such transformations could lead to loss of cultural memory, erosion of social cohesion, and marginalization of traditional authorities. The struggle to maintain continuity in the face of disruption was a defining feature of ancient societies, leaving lasting imprints on the evolution of resilient cultural forms. Adaptation, innovation, and responses to hardship, technological and social innovation despite pervasive adversity, ancient humans demonstrated remarkable capacity for adaptation and innovation. The development of new tools, agricultural techniques, and social institutions reflected dynamic responses to environmental and social stressors. The domestication of plants and animals, the invention of irrigation systems, and the construction of defensive fortifications exemplify strategies devised to mitigate hardship. Technological innovation often arose from necessity. The creation of storage facilities and preservation methods solved problems of seasonal scarcity, while advances in metallurgy and weaponry reshaped power dynamics between rival groups. Social innovations, such as alliances, trade networks, and legal systems, facilitated collective action and resource sharing, cultural resilience, and the evolution of society. The perseverance of human societies in the face of adversity stands as testimony to the resilience of cultural systems. Rituals, myths, and collective memory served as repositories of knowledge encoding strategies for survival and adaptation. Oral traditions preserved historical experiences of hardship, offering models for how subsequent generations might respond to crises. Symbolic thought, empathy, and cooperation enabled ancient humans to transcend individual limitations and forge complex social bonds. These capacities, honed through millennia of struggle, underpin the rise of civilization and the continuing evolution of human society. The dialectic of hardship and progress. Recurring theme in the study of ancient challenges is the dialectical relationship between hardship and progress. Although adversity was destructive, it also accelerated the development of problem-solving skills, social cooperation, and cultural innovation. The capacity to learn from failure, adapt to new conditions, and envision alternative futures is rooted in humanity's historical experience of overcoming hardship. This dialectic is evident in the cycles of collapse and renewal observed in the archaeological record. Societies that succumbed to crisis were often succeeded by new formations that absorbed the lessons of the past, demonstrating the dynamic interplay between catastrophe and development. Conclusion: the hardships faced by humans in antiquity encompassed a vast range of environmental, biological, social, and psychological dimensions. Climatic variability, resource scarcity, disease, violence, and inequality posed constant threats to survival and well-being. Yet these adversities also spurred remarkable responses, technological, social, and cultural innovations that transformed human life. Thus, the story of ancient hardship is not one of unending suffering, but of resilience, adaptation, and transformation. By examining the lived realities of the past, we gain a deeper appreciation of the capacities that have enabled humanity to endure and thrive. The lessons of ancient challenges remain profoundly relevant today, illuminating our own struggles with sustainability, social justice, and collective resilience. As we confront the uncertainties of the present and future, the experiences of our ancestors serve both as a warning and as a source of inspiration, reminding us of the enduring power of human creativity in the face of adversity.